Mike and Rob, thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you just tuning in, we have Mike Geddings, our past chair of the Chamber, and Rob Youngblood, former president and CEO for over 18 years here at the York County Regional Chamber. It's great to have you both on, and thank you for joining us as we try to gather some thoughts and memories of past Chamber life here for the annual meeting.
It's a pleasure to be a part of this.
Glad to be here.
Why don't we go ahead and get started? Really, I guess, Rob, you may be the best person from an insider's point of view, and then Mike as a member of the Chamber. Both of you have many years of involvement, but what would you say that has changed the most about the Chamber in the last, say, 20 years, and even more recently in the last 5 or 10 years? You know, there have been a lot of changes in the business world, but specifically with our Chamber. Rob, would you like to start with that one?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. I think the biggest change is the perception of the Chamber in the community. I think for many years, the Chamber was seen as a country club, elitist group that partied all the time, had drinking parties all the time. And that's not the case. Well, it was much less if it was the case then, but at least for the last 18 years, I think we've changed our events to where they're focused events. There may be some drinking or a drink or two that happens at our evening events, but they're more focused on a purpose and more focused on really business. And we are, I think, more open now than ever to anyone who wants to participate in the Chamber and enjoy Chamber services or events. So that's the one thing that I think has changed, I guess, the last several years.
So I would agree with you. There was a time where the Chamber was known as, the host of Main Street Live, for instance, and now we are hosting State of the Community events where it's informative. So while networking still happens, it may not look quite the same or be the same time of day. But you're right. I do think as a whole, things have changed as it relates to the Chamber's perception. What would you say, Mike, as a member?
Yeah, I think the diversity of members today, especially in the leadership too, I see a lot of diversity in the board, in the area councils, and just in the leadership overall, much more than I saw in the earlier years. And I think that's really good. We've been able to bring on great folks that are leaders, and it's affected I think our ability within the community to serve our members when we have that much diversity. Really been good.
Well, speaking of serving our membership, we have obviously in recent years been struck with various obstacles and issues and challenges. We've merged with the Chamber recently. We have been through the beginning of a pandemic. We are now trying to work through what life is like as we try to hit the post-pandemic mark. What do you think in terms of value that the Chamber has brought or can bring to a community?
I think the biggest value is just having a single source of information. And you may not get it all, but you visit the Chamber website, Colleen so aptly put together, and if it's not there, it tells you where to find it. And this is mainly resources for businesses and business owners, but there's also plenty for just the average citizen that needs to find out what's going on and how COVID relates to business or does not.
And I would say too, maybe I'm going to turn it on you just a little bit. The most recent event that we've been involved in as a Chamber, will you talk just a minute about the clinic and about our involvement as a Chamber, because you've been intimately involved in that since its startup?
Sure. Well, we were, as a Chamber, we were invited to a meeting at the hospital mid-January, and there was discussion about a community-led, volunteer-run COVID vaccine clinic, and that came to be very quickly. And one of the things that as a Chamber we were specifically asked about was helping with supplies for the clinic, as well as hospitality for the volunteers. We're actually up to 90 volunteers a day now, and we're feeding them. We're making sure they have, snacks and water and other things, but we're also making sure there's enough masks and hand sanitizer and gloves and copy paper and rubber bands. There's just the things that you would normally need to run a clinic, and our business community has really stepped up. The deliveries, the York County has been amazing. And you have businesses sending employees over, they're not making them use a vacation day to come volunteer. They are keeping them on the clock, some of them, and allowing them to come volunteer. So I think our businesses understood that in order to get back to business, this vaccination was a key piece of that. So that has definitely, been something we didn't see coming in terms of our duties and responsibilities this year, but it has been very rewarding. And I think, as Rob mentioned, a great way for the business community to have one place to go, one voice to be able to say, how can I help? And this is how I can get plugged in. So it has been a great way to partner for sure.
Yeah,
kudos to you and the existing staff for that effort. That's outstanding. And I think the other thing that COVID has shown me over the past year is that how important not just relationships, but face-to-face meetings are, and that we're really social creatures, and we need
as we sit in the same building in 3 different rooms. Thank you, Rob, for pointing that out. Yes,
but we need people, and that's one thing that I don't think we realize the value of what the chamber offered, with opportunities for people to be in the same room. And now, of course, they're in the same room, but maybe 6 feet apart, and on virtual meetings as well. But that's a very important function and role that the chamber plays that I think has gotten an exclamation point over the last 10 years. Now, I'll have to ask Mike when he thinks it'll end. I know he's an expert on that.
Yeah. So, Amy, you don't know this probably. Way back
Your
in
predictions.
March, way back in March, Rob and I had this conversation. Rob, man, this thing can't live in the heat. Give us about 3 or 4 weeks. It's going to go away when it gets 100 degrees outside. It can't live in the heat. We don't have flu season in the summer. Surely this thing won't last more than 3 or 4 weeks. And Rob just shook his head and said, "Yeah, we'll see how that goes," didn't you, Rob?
Let's say it's a good thing he doesn't do heating and air as a profession, huh, Rob?
Yeah, good.
All right, well, let me get us back on track here. One of the things that I think this group has done well through the years is to always look to see what the trends are, what might be coming next, be it just for this community or maybe it's a state or national trend. But what do you all see as opportunities moving forward for the chamber?
Mike, you want to take that one first?
Yeah, sure, I do. I think it's really important that we continue to work through our legislators and do everything we can with laws changing so often, so many things going on at legislative level. I think it's really important that we stay engaged with our state and local officials, just to represent the business community well. I think we already do that well, but I think going forward, that's an opportunity that we don't need to miss. We absolutely need to stay engaged legislatively, among a lot of other things that come to mind. But to me, that's a really strong piece that we can't miss.
And I also see the trend of chambers and other nonprofit organizations becoming more purposefully driven than program driven. Now, we'll always have great programs. That's been the hallmark of the chamber. But I think also doing things that really make a difference in the daily work of businesses will become more a focus of the chamber, and also social issues that affect business. I think the chamber will need to step up probably more to a greater extent than we have in the past. And that's going to be a real challenge. What do you think, Amy?
Well, one of the things that I noticed during as the pandemic began, we had a lot of questions as business owners about how do we, for instance, PPP funds. It was about as confusing and complicated to figure out that process as it has been for many Americans to figure out how to get a vaccine, right? Like, it just was not easy. And one of the things that was especially valuable for me as a business owner was to get on a call with others at the chamber who were literally going through the process at various banks. Some were local banks, some were national banks, credit unions, but to hear what they were being told and then to really take that information and get it out to the rest of our members that maybe weren't in that conversation. So I think one of the things that we can do more and potentially better, and especially now, while it's not a good thing, we're more comfortable with all of these virtual meetings. It does, I think, allow us maybe access to some folks that wouldn't always have time to come down to a meeting or to sit at a round table or even the time to prepare for that, to be a part of some fast conversations that get to solutions, and then we can push that out to our members. So I think this has, the entire pandemic has allowed a lot of folks to sit back and take stock of some things, but I think it's also allowed us to sit and to be still for a moment and to realize that if we can just work together and communicate as a group collectively, I think we know a lot more and can get a lot more done than individually. So, all right, one last question and then we'll wrap this up. So you both have many memories with the chamber, various events, committee meetings. I mentioned mergers earlier, networking events, strategic planning sessions, you name it. Is there a particular moment that stands out when you were especially proud to be a part of the York County Regional Chamber?
I'll start if that's okay, Mike.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to take us way back to 2005 and to an issue that we call the CSX issue, an intermodal facility issue. The county council had pursued or had been approached by the CSX rail lines or railroad about building an intermodal facility in York County near the Catawba area, somewhat in the old Bowater. It was called Bowater back then. And it was the classic case of a NIMBY syndrome, where citizens or neighbors don't want something in their backyard that they don't think is going to be attractive or productive. And we really, I think we went all out on this issue. It's interesting that we didn't win this issue, but we, I think, scored a lot of points and let people know where we stand. First of all, we went and visited another community that had just received an intermodal facility, Fairburn, Georgia. Went and stayed overnight with some volunteers. Dennis Stuber was one of those. You all may remember Dennis. He sort of led the charge on this. And we went and saw what this intermodal facility meant to the community. And I mean, it just had economic development written all over it with suppliers, providers, in the area where this basic intermodals where train tracks meet road tracks, and basically where the changing of trucks or rail to trucks, and then the trucks would distribute products and goods to the facilities where they belong and where they were sold. And we saw what a great impact this had on the community. Not great in jobs, but just the spin-off effect of it. So we came back, we put our position together, we made the statement at a packed house at Baxter Hood Center in the banquet area, which has become, I think, a library at this point. But it was full of citizens. I bet 500 citizens who were not happy that this was being discussed and not happy that the chamber had anything to do with it, nor Rob Youngblood had anything to do with it. And many people I've known for many time hissed as we presented our position and the jobs that it would bring and the impact on economic development. Now, the county council voted it down, but that really established a position for the chamber to show that, well, one, we do care about the community, but we also care about jobs and economic development. It really staked a claim for us for that. The other part of the story, and I'll try to be more brief on this, is that though it didn't happen at that time, it was voted down by one vote. It came up again, and some county council members came to me and some others and said, hey, we want to get this back on the table. CSX is going to sweeten the deal. And we said, no. County council has spoken. The public has spoken. They don't want this. They're not going to accept it. We need to move on to our next business issue, our next economic development project. I think picking our battles has always been an important part and thing that we've done as far as advocacy and being advocates of the business community. And I was real proud of that. The county council members that were in support didn't like it at all. But I think we had very good ground to stand on and to say, we did this issue, it didn't work, let's move on to something else and fight another day.
Boy, is that hard to follow. What a story. Wow. I'll just comment on a couple of things that I think make me proud to be a part of this organization and have served and been in this for a little while. First thing being that it really, being part of this organization has allowed me to increase my circle of friends in business, really. That's played an important role in some mentors, some folks that I would not have known had I not been engaged in the chamber the way I am. So that's been a really important piece for me personally to be engaged in the chamber. But I guess putting those pennies for progress signs out and being part of something bigger than just individuals has really been very gratifying. And I think most of the audience probably has heard these statistics. And if Jerry Helms is out there, man, he can spit them off like nothing. He knows every statistic there is around pennies. He's been involved with it for so long. But I think just under $1 billion over the last, how many years, Rob, since we started doing this?
97 was the first vote.
So about $1 billion of road improvements in our county because of Pennies for Progress, and the chamber supported that initiative every time it's come along. And that makes me really proud to be involved in this chamber.
Well, what comes to mind for me really are two things. The first is the recent Panthers project being announced. It'll be interesting to see what this community looks like in 5 or 10 years. I noticed the construction, the exit. You can see where I think exit 81 will be on 77 now. And so that's exciting. That's not something that didn't come without a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And the chamber was a small part of that. But I do think our engagement certainly helped. And if nothing else, I think helped. As issues came up between the city and the county, we were able to be there and be a part of that conversation. So to me, that's something, I was proud to say that the chamber was a part of. Another issue, and Rob, this goes back somewhat to what you were speaking of earlier. Sometimes what the citizens want and what the businesses need aren't always the same thing. And if you think about a school bond referendum, that impacts businesses much differently than it does individuals as homeowners and taxpayers. But as a chamber, we see the value of a strong educational background for future workforce, right? And having those skills. So, sometimes it's not as simple as we would like it to be. And sometimes we do have to think big picture and long range, but being at the table on those conversations, I think is something that we can all be proud of. Well, thank you both very much for your time. As you just heard, that was our alarm. It's time for us to move on to our next events. But thank you both for being here. This has been a wonderful conversation. I've enjoyed it very much. Thank you.